Welcome to the Velvet Room.
Hey people, my name is Rustel. You may know me for my Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon speedrun. But today, however, I'll be doing something a little bit different from what I usually do. So, as you may have guessed from the title, I am going to be reviewing Persona 3, specifically Persona 3 Reload, despite the fact that I'm only 8 hours in at the time of writing this, and I have not yet finished the game. Now, before you click off the video, just allow me to explain. My vision for this is to turn these videos into a series of some kind, where I will be releasing more and more parts of this review as I progress through the game. Now, I'll admit this is a pretty unconventional way of reviewing a video game or any piece of media, but there is a reason as to why I chose to do it this way. Here's the setup. I just played through the entirety of Persona 5 Royale, about 200 hours of gameplay, and I still wanted to play more Persona games, so I naturally booted up Persona 3. But I felt something extremely familiar right as I started playing. Something that I had previously experienced back when I had completed Yakuza 0 and decided to play Kiwami 1 right after my playthrough. Now, don't get me wrong, Kiwami 1 is a great game and I had a lot of fun playing it, but I did struggle to enjoy the game and also getting into the plot at the very start. Because even though the game had been modernized, I could tell that its overall shape remained quite dated. I would say that is especially noticeable from the quality of the dialogues, whether it is in sub-stories or within the main plot, and that I found to be off-putting right after playing through 0. As I started playing Persona 3, I definitely did not expect this feeling to come back and creep up on me some more, but I also know that with Kiwami 1, once I had gotten past the rough edges at the very start of the game and got into a point where I had grown more accustomed to the new characters and to the new setting, I was enjoying the game and I put a lot of hours into it. So I'm expecting this to be the case with Persona 3 just as well. This time around though, I am prepared, and I think this is the best opportunity to study this feeling and to see exactly where and when in Persona 3 my impression of the game will change for the better. So let's dive into it. Now, in order to conduct this review, I also need to talk about Persona 5 and compare it to Persona 5 because it's the contrast between the two games that actually made me dislike Kiwami the first time around, and I believe it is the same thing right here with Persona 3. So let's get right into it. Let's begin with the introduction, the prologue of the game. If you've played Persona 5 Royale, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to forget this whole scene in the casino and not knowing really what's going on, why people are chasing you, why you have something on you that you're apparently stealing from the casino, and how you end up in jail at the end of the day. There are also some different leads here and there that are thrown around by introducing different characters that will become relevant later on. I'm mostly thinking about the SIU director and with, say, Nijima, the prosecutor, and also by what the cop that interrogates you is actually telling you. First off, that you've been sold off, and also that apparently you are accused of having killed someone. And then right there, you just started the game and you already have 3 to 5 different plot lines that all will end up converging back to the main plot line, but it does give you some kind of idea as to what could have happened, what led to this, how you ended up in that jail cell. What you actually did. Did you actually kill someone? Did you do it intentionally or not? Persona 3's introduction, however, is just plain weird, I'll be honest with you. So let's take a look at it. Makoto basically just arrives at the station, heads to the dorms. There's blood on the floor. There are coffins that emanate this red aura everywhere. The sky is green. Makoto doesn't actually seem to be that troubled by it. He just goes to the dorm and, well, then you sign the contract. That's typical in the Persona game. And then you meet Yukari, who is pretty much just about to blast you with her persona because she doesn't expect another human to actually be alive during the dark hour. Now, I'm not trying to make the point that your game needs to have a flamboyant introduction to it, a huge opening with colors, action, drama. But here, I don't understand Makoto's reaction to what's going on in front of him. He is completely blasé, almost like he doesn't care, or perhaps this seems completely normal to him, even though he comments that stuff looks creepy. And after all of that, not only do you not really get an option to ask Yukari or Mitsuru or anyone really about what happened, you are actually just going to go to bed. Yeah, you just sleep it off, like it's not a problem. You don't even get the option to ask, like, hey, what were those coffins? You can ask Yukari why does she have a gun on her person at the time, and she will come up with a lie, but that's the only thing, the only kind of pushback that Makoto is allowed to do, despite how weird and supernatural things seem to be around him. You also get to ask Yukari about the kid and the contract that you signed, and she says that she doesn't know what you're talking about. Now, I feel like she doesn't push back on you a little bit, like she should be a bit creeped out, considering that you've just met and you're already saying nonsense to her, or what seems to be nonsense. There are a few scenes like that in Persona 5 as well, where you have the option of trying to tell your teammates about Igor, but obviously people don't understand what you're talking about. But that comes way later into the game, and it usually is at a point where your teammates trust you enough that they don't really judge you for having a weird opinion or saying something a bit off the cuff like that. Next thing I did want to talk about is pretty much the introduction of new characters in Persona 3 compared to Persona 5. When I say characters, I'm mostly referring to teammates. Ryuji is introduced to you very early on, as he's your first teammate, even before Morgana. You don't really get a good impression of him immediately. You don't really earn his trust until you awaken your own persona and save him. So at that point, I would argue that the friendship feels earned. Same thing with An, where I felt as though when I first played Persona 5, in the first week before the incident with Kamoshida, she is actually quite distant from you, and she will actually seem like she could turn into an antagonist or trying to hinder you in some way before she actually joins your party. That is a progressive way of adding new teammates and characters to the story, and to give them a reason to actually participate in what's going on. Something that doesn't really happen in Persona 3. I will take the example of Yukari and Junpei, which are your first two teammates. Yukari, at the very least, you can make the argument that there are some good reasons as to why you would try and make a friendship that early. You live in the same dorm, you are in the same class, and she is also aware of the dark hour at the very beginning of the game, and she definitely doesn't expect you to not be affected by it like other humans. My issue lies with Junpei, however. You go to school for your first day, and this guy comes up to you, doesn't know you, immediately befriends you, immediately tells you how to kind of sleep in the middle of class. immediately tries to ask you question and show you stuff, and you never really build a friendship with him. You never really interact with him to get his trust. He just by default is kind of pulled towards Makoto. Now, I was a bit surprised right after when he joined the Seas. That was a weird introduction to the group, I will say, because it happens off screen. It's just one night you go back to the dorm and he's there, and he actually tells you that he almost got hit by one of the shadows the other day, and so he's gonna move in now and just help you out, which is, I mean, it's great, but there's no build-up. I do actually like Junpei after playing a couple hours, after seeing him in game, after using him as a teammate. But by the time he joined my party, I just simply didn't really feel anything about him. Now let's go back to the topic of the awakening of Persona. I think the way that it is handled in Persona 3 is a little bit weird, to say the least. I'll go back to Persona 5. The way you summon a Persona is through the will of rebellion. It is something you have inside of you, and once you are pushed to your limit, it manifests into a Persona. That means that to summon it, you need to be willing to rebel against society, but you also need to be put into a situation where your ideals are tested and you fight back. And that's exactly what happens to Joker. Makoto, on the other hand, kind of just gets to awaken his persona out of the blue, and I'm not too convinced about how he does it. I mean, here's the scene, right? You basically go back to the dorms one night and you hear like an earthquake or something. So you wake up and Yukari tries to help you leave the building as fast as possible, but the back door is blocked. So then you go up the stairs and you end up on the roof where the shadow corners you. Now Yukari tries to summon her own persona, but she is, due to the stress of the situation, unable to use her evoker, and it falls to the ground. Makoto then simply picks up the evoker and by instinct knows that he has to aim it at himself, pull the trigger, say the word persona, even though no one has explained to him what that word even means. And that works just fine for him. Like, what I'm criticizing here is that if you put yourself in the shoes of Makoto at that point of the game, you are coming in to a new city, to a new high school. You are a transfer student. You know two people at this point of the game, really. You're only friends with two people. And suddenly you get pushed into a supernatural encounter and you see your friend trying to aim a gun at her own head. She's unable to do that, and you just so happen to follow along as if it was completely natural for you to do so. I don't know about you, but that feels off to me. And like, it's kind of confirmed by the game very soon after that you weren't really supposed to know how to do that by yourself. You are given an evoker of your own very soon after that experience, and only then are you told what personas actually are and what the evoker actually does. Something else about this sequence that I just want to talk about real quick. I do know that Akihiko is unable to fight at that moment, but Mitsuru is in the control room just standing there. She doesn't know that Makoto is aware of what a persona is or that he is even capable of summoning one. All she knows is that he doesn't seem to be affected by the Dark Hour, but the concept of the Dark Hour itself is still kind of misunderstood. And she just stays in the command center while she watches you and Yukari be cornered at the top of the balcony. It's just, why? What are you doing, girl? So that was my story, dialogue, writing section. Let's talk about the gameplay now. So I don't have a problem with Tartarus being the main dungeon. I will say that obviously I prefer Persona 5 Palaces because they change the ambience a lot more and they seem to kind of have a reason to be the way that they are. But I don't mind Tartarus. I didn't mind Mementos either in Persona 5, so this is not a problem for me. What I do kind of dislike is the fact that Tartarus is a bit more punishing than Mementos in Persona 5 for a couple of reasons. The first one is that whenever you walk up the stairs, you are committing to leaving the floor you were currently on behind you. There's no way of going back down the stairs, which means that sometimes you have to take a decision on whether or not you want to go further or if you can go further, and some of the times, well, you're kind of screwed. Now, I don't mind that system as a whole. It does annoy me a little bit that I have to go back all the way down to the bottom floor of Tartarus to go to the Velvet Room or to save the game, and that we don't have those rest stops that we had in Mementos. But I think it does add a layer of difficulty to the thing that I find interesting, although perhaps a little bit punishing. Fighting enemies, I will say that it's not great. Well, the combat itself, like the actual combat, is good, but fighting enemies on the overworld, dare I say, is outside of combat, like engaging combat, is not very satisfying and is kind of hard to pull off. Persona 5's design, where you could just hide in a corner and enemies could just walk next to you and never see you as long as you stayed within cover, was kind of broken, a little bit too strong. Like, you actually had to go out of your way to raise the security level of the palace that you were in, because it was very, very easy to dodge encounters and to just always get the ambush of enemies. Here, well, I do like the fact that you don't get to ambush enemies as reliably as you did in Persona 5, but I also don't like the fact that it's so unreliable. The enemies tend to move in just random patterns, and if they see you and you hit them from the front, you don't get the ambush off. You have to hit them from the back. But how are you supposed to sneak up enemies and hit them with a slash to start the encounter without risking to actually be cornered yourself? Now, in my opinion, this makes Tartarus and navigating the place a bit of a pain in the ass, I'll be honest with you. It's not a big deal, and I do like the fact that I won't always start my battles from an ambush and have the advantage. It's good that sometimes the game will actually have the advantage over me, and I have to deal with that. It does vary within the gameplay, and it's a good thing. But I just cannot get behind the fact that it's quite random. Something that Persona 5 did that I really liked as a whole, but that also made the game perhaps a little bit too easy, is the fact that the shadows that you were fighting in the metaverse were actually personas themselves. Now, this is good because I feel like the design in Persona 3 are way too similar from each other, and it's kind of hard to tell them apart. So it's way easier to remember what a persona looks like and the weakness of that persona, and then abuse it or make use of it. It also allowed you to learn weaknesses of enemies not only by fighting them, but by fusing more personas, because the stats that you would get from those new personas would also transfer into your battle intel. Here, you don't really get that, and I don't know if I'm missing something, or if perhaps this is just meant to be like this at the beginning of the game. But the only real way to know what an enemy is weak to is to simply throw everything at them and get lucky. SP is also quite difficult to just manage in this game, I find, especially with Yukari and Makoto. Junpei doesn't really have much of an issue because he's a physical attacker, but SP is a resource that is very finite, and I don't really have the privilege of just casting every spell I have until I find the weakness by complete accident. From time to time, you have shadows that, kind of indicate what they're weak to based on the looks of their, design, but that's not the case for most of the shadows that you fight, especially this early on in the game. Now, the reason why I said that this wasn't a perfect system in Persona 5 is because it also made the game a bit too easy, considering that you could just guess the weaknesses of enemies for free, basically. There was no real consequences to meeting an enemy and not really knowing what to do against them, because you could always get their persona into your mask and actually learn everything about them, and every other encounter that you run into that has that persona facing you is one where you will have extra intel, which makes that process a bit too easy sometimes. Now, something that I do like in Persona 3 over Persona 5 is the fact that Tartarus is a nighttime activity. Now, yes, there are a lot of confidence that you have to, meet during the evening time in Persona 3, but the biggest annoyance that I personally had with Persona 5 is because you did infiltrations always in the afternoon until you got the confidence that allowed you to go back outside in the evening after going into the metaverse. That meant that you were locking basically the entire day just to go into the metaverse. And it's even worse whenever you were doing a palace, because doing a palace, the ideal way of doing it is to go from the start of the palace and do it in one go. That is the optimal way of doing things, but if you do it like that, you have to send a calling card pretty much immediately after. The reason for that is your teammates don't want to hang out with you as long as you haven't beaten the boss at that point. So as soon as you secure the route to the treasure, you are also committing the next day to do another infiltration and to do the boss fight. Otherwise, you're punished. And actually, I lost a lot of time in my first playthrough of Persona 5 because I did not know that it was intended for my teammates to just not want to hang out if the calling card hadn't been sent and the boss fight hadn't been already beaten. So props to Persona 3 for putting that part of the game, dungeon crawling, at the end of the day, because at the very least it doesn't mean that you are wasting 2 slots of a day and you're only wasting the night slot instead. Now, I'm just gonna briefly talk about some very minor issues. It may as well be like a little bit of a rant. I can't really find a better word for it. This is very, very minor, but fast traveling is too fucking slow. Right, look at this. You fast travel if you want to go from the school all the way up to the dorms or anywhere that's very far at the other side of the map, at the other side of the city. You have this entire animation that plays out each time. And I just kind of don't like that. I feel like it was way better in Persona 5. Like, it was responsive. It was very easy to get to where I wanted to be very quickly. It doesn't help that a lot of the areas that you can visit in Persona 3 are built vertically, right? Like the strip mall. So even if you do fast travel over there, if you actually wanted to, I don't know, go to the restaurant that's on the 3rd floor, you have to take the stairs each time, and that just adds a little bit more time waste every time. Something else that I found just a little bit irritating and a little bit like of an info dump for a new player was the fact that different shops have sales for the items that they sell. So for example, if you go to the pharmacy on a specific day of the week, you get reduced prices and you get different special items. Here, the most optimal way is to actually go into the shop. Like, I don't know, if you want to buy a new weapon, you have to go on the day of the sale. But the only real way of tracking that is to memorize it yourself. It's not a big deal, but it's a little bit annoying to just have that kind of information and to have to remember each shop whenever they have sales and try to plan accordingly. Now, I'm done with the critique of the game. I think I can move on and give my conclusion for the first part of the game. I think that perhaps there will be explanations as to why Makoto was so quickly up to speed on how to use the evoker in that situation. I think that perhaps the next characters that will join the team will also have a better introduction and a better relationship to the group that will probably take some build up. And I think the game will also get a lot easier as you play it more. Once you remember the sales, like whenever they take place for each shop, eventually that just like becomes something that you always have in your mind. You just have to play enough of the game until it kind of is drilled into your head. As for the combat, well, it's, you know, turn-based. I have nothing bad to say about it. It works just as well. If I had one nitpick, it would be that the button pass animation was just so satisfying to pull off, whereas the equivalent of that in P3 is just not as fun, but that's not really a big deal. I do like the Velvet Room still. I like the fusions, I like the personas. I also like that Elizabeth gives you requests to earn items, or basically side objectives that you can do to facilitate your runs into Tartarus. It's a small thing, I would say, but it's a nice thing to have. It does add a little bit of fluff to the whole experience, and I've liked that so far. In conclusion, well, I think that this game looks like it's going to be good eventually, but I do have some issues with it, and that's why this first video, which I hope will be the first of many, is so critical of it. I'm not saying that the game is bad. I do have to say again that this game was released about 20 years ago. It's an old game with a new fresh coat of paint. It's not surprising to have these issues, and as I said before at the very start of the video, this is exactly what Kiwami 1 felt like to play at the time. So I'm not surprised by the first part of the game being such a downer with so many critiques that I had to bring up. These things are kind of holding back my enjoyment of the game at this point, though I expect my opinion to change by the time I reach the end of the game. The point of this series is to track how my enjoyment of the game will evolve as I get through each boss and each arc and each story element. Hopefully this video will be the first one, and my very last video on the topic will be the complete opposite, and I will actually call myself a dumbass for being so critical of this game by the time I finish it. Alright, thank you for watching. Please leave a like and hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya!